Hey everybody, it's Meredith Miller with Inner Integration. Today, the topic I have for you is about the two kinds of anger. One of my clients had suggested that I make a video about this after our session in which I said something about this, and it really shifted something for her. So before I get into that, real quick, I just want to mention, be sure to check out the Inner Integration podcast if you haven't already. The link is below the video in the video description with all the other links that you might be looking for. But we've got about 8 different episodes up there so far in the podcast. Each one is on a very specific topic within the umbrella of recovery after narcissistic abuse. So you're going to find some really helpful topics there for you. Also, my schedule is now reopened. I was in this moving transition. Thank you for your patience, for all of you who have been asking about sessions. I opened the calendar again, so that's starting the end of September. The last week of September, I'll have new availability for sessions. So, back to the anger. There's 2 different kinds of anger, and it's really important to understand the difference between these 2 kinds of anger if you're struggling with dealing with the anger. So if you're a woman, you might have a hard time expressing the anger, admitting that you're angry. You might have more of a tendency to turn that anger inwards into depression or to leave it stuck in your body, and then it manifests as inflammation, as all kinds of chronic health issues that can come up. The anger literally will eat you alive if you don't deal with it. So the anger actually has a biological survival mechanism built into it. This is the first kind of anger, which is called righteous anger. Now, I learned this from Michael Reed Gach. He was a teacher that I had at the Acupressure Institute in Berkeley almost 10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago. In one of his classes, he taught me this, and it just shifted everything as I was trying to reconcile and understand the abuse that had happened in my family. Now, at the time, I wasn't aware of the narcissistic abuse. I was only aware of the sexual abuse that had happened. But what Michael taught us is that this is called righteous anger. When you are violated, used, mistreated, abused in some kind of way, that anger is built into your system to motivate you to do something about it, to make some kind of change so that things are okay for you again. So that kind of righteous anger means someone violated something. They violated a limit. They violated a boundary that either you knew was there and you set the boundary and they bulldozed the boundary, or you didn't even know that you needed to put a boundary there and the person hurt you and you realized afterwards how angry you were about that, but you didn't realize that you didn't have a boundary. So it's really important to understand that this is a normal and natural response to abuse. It is normal and natural that you're angry. Now, you might also know that the abuser will use that against you. They'll tell you things like, "I think you're angry," which is the line that my mother pulled after about a 3-hour conversation when I had confronted her a couple years ago about the abuse. She went through every other covert aggressive tactic, and none of them worked. And then at the end, she used a form of blame shifting to tell me, "I think you're angry." So you might have noticed that your abuser said this kind of thing to you too. You might have even gone to therapy with the abuser, and you might have gotten blamed that you have an anger problem, but the therapist didn't see that there was abuse going on and didn't understand that this is righteous anger, that you're angry for a reason because you need to protect yourself, you need to defend yourself, you need to get away, you need to set some kind of boundary. So if you're still angry right now, I'm going to recommend that you do an anger processing exercise. You can find that on my website under the courses. It's only $5. It teaches you how to do the anger processing for anybody in your life. Could have been an intimate partner, a family member, someone at work, a friend, a neighbor, anything. So I really recommend that you work on that anger processing. Then you want to make sure that the proper boundaries are in place. So you need to evaluate these boundaries. For example, no contact is a boundary. Are you no contact with that person, or are they still getting in? So let's say it's not a situation where you're at work and you're still forced to keep this job for the time being. And let's say that it's not a situation where you're raising a child and you're co-parenting with this person and you're forced to have some kind of contact. Let's say it's a family member, it's an ex, it was a friend, it was someone else in your life. Now I know some people are like, wait, family members? But you have to have contact with them. No, you don't. You don't. You don't owe them that. You don't, even if they're family, you don't owe them that. It might be that you're currently dependent on them. You might be dependent on them financially. You might be dependent on their living situation, staying with them, something like that. Maybe that's a temporary situation, which means you need to have other kinds of boundaries in place, even if you can't be 100% no contact. If you have the option to be no contact, be no contact, because that boundary is how you begin to take your power back. That boundary is what stops yourself from being re-traumatized over and over again every time this person shows up with something new in your life. Now, if you are co-parenting or you're still at that job that you can't leave that job yet, you want to have the absolute most minimum contact. So if this is a work situation, you're only going to talk about work with that person. Absolutely nothing personal. You're not going to go on lunch breaks with them. You're not going to go on happy hour. You're not going to go to parties with colleagues. None of that. Completely remove yourself from that environment and only deal with the actual work situation and keep everything in writing, because you know the manipulators and abusers will always try all kinds of trickery to get you in trouble or to leave things ambiguous and open. So be explicit and direct and in written communication. If you're dealing with the co-parent of your child or children, then you only want to talk about the kids. Times that they're picking, the day they're picking the kids up at school, you drop them off in the morning, they pick them up in the afternoon. Or there's a recital or an event or an expense or something like that, a health issue. Okay, only the bare minimum and about the children. Absolutely nothing personal. Don't let them start you in on any kind of personal conversations or anything like that. Don't let any of that happen. So that's one, is as no contact as possible. If you can be no contact, be no contact. If not, the absolute most minimum contact. Now, it could be that this person is dead. It could be that this person, you've been in no contact with this person for a very long time. So if you're still angry and the person is dead and you've been no contact for a really long time, but every time you think about that person or you talk about that person, you could just feel how angry you're getting. And maybe even other people notice that and they mention that to you. So what that means is you need new boundaries. You're going to need new mental and emotional boundaries. So you don't need the physical boundaries because the person's no longer there. You either have the physical boundary in place with no contact or they're gone and they're physically off the planet. So that means you need new mental boundaries. That means you need to stop thinking about them. That means every time your mind starts thinking about them and you're ruminating, or you're beating yourself up, or you're talking to yourself like the narcissist or other abuser was, or maybe what you notice is that it's like you're just still subscribed to their reality system. It's like you're still living in their reality and you're worried about what they're thinking about you and what they're saying about you. These are all signs that you need to have more mental boundaries. That means that is not my reality. I am unsubscribing from that reality. I'm no longer allowing my mind to indulge in that, because where my mind goes, my energy follows. And I want to take responsibility and ownership over my energy. Therefore, I need to take responsibility and ownership over my mind. So that's one thing, is mental boundaries. And another thing is emotional boundaries. So maybe your abuser was a fear propagandist. They were always coming at you with fear. The psychopath in the family, whether it's the mother or the father, will control the fear and the resources of that family. So they're always controlling you through that fear. And so it could be that maybe they're long gone, but your mind still goes to those places, and then you feel that fear coming up inside of you. So one is, don't let your mind go there with your thoughts, because your thoughts are the direction. Your emotion, which is more connected to your body, the emotion is the power. It's the magnetic aspect. So that's where you want to own that power, and you want to say, that thought is an invitation to have fear. Is there really something I need to be afraid of there? No. It's not a bear. It's not a lion. It's not anything that's going to actually put me at risk. It's just old fear propaganda that's still running through my mind. And then once that thought comes up, the emotion of fear comes up to meet it. So you want to start getting rid of that fear, not allowing yourself to indulge in that, because you're giving all your power to that fear. And that person's long gone. Long gone. So take your power back and set new mental and emotional boundaries. Now, the second kind of anger is toxic anger. This is the kind of anger that is used to control, scare, dominate, or intimidate another person. This is the kind of anger that the abuser has. This is the kind of anger that you were used to seeing in your partner or maybe growing up with your mother or father. And this could even be one of the reasons that you're afraid to let yourself get angry, or you're afraid to admit that you're angry, because you've always associated anger with that raging monster, right? That is a whole different kind of anger. That kind of anger comes up when, for example, you set a boundary or a limit. You say no. You don't go along with whatever the abuser wants you to do. So they use the toxic anger to try to get you to follow what they want, to try to get you to submit. Because, it's terrifying, right? So then you say yes just because you're terrified. So the other one is when you challenge them. When you challenge them on something, this isn't okay. I don't like this. The way that you did that, I felt this way. Or you call them out straight up about something. That feels pretty manipulative, the way that you just turned that around on me. That feels really manipulative, the way you're trying to get me to rescue you and take responsibility for something that you did. When you call something out like that, again, you're going to meet the lashing out, the intimidation, and the attempt to control you through that toxic anger. You'll also find this anger in the abuser when you give them even the slightest criticism. And it could be a constructive criticism. It might even be helpful. But what happens is they immediately come with that narcissistic injury. No matter what it was, they get that narcissistic injury and they're raging and they're angry and they're throwing this at you because they want to punish you for saying that. They want to punish you for giving them any kind of criticism. They simply can't handle it. They feel like it's an attack. I don't know if you guys have seen, if you've rewatched or watched a couple years ago, we just put this video up as a throwback video on Instagram and Facebook this week. And in that video, it talks about the 3 kinds of inner child wounds. This is from Roberto Perez's work. And the third one, which is not yours likely, the third kind of wound is typically the kind of wound that an abuser have, which is that they feel attacked. And so that's why any kind of criticism or any kind of boundary or any kind of no, I'm sorry, I don't want to do that. When you don't give them what they want, they perceive that as an attack on them. And that's why they rage at you. And finally, you're going to see this kind of anger. It could be jealousy. They could be jealous of something that you have, and so they'll lash out at you or try to punish you for that. But in general, anytime you have a problem with an abusive person, this problem comes up, and they're immediately going to impose themselves on you to get what they want. So if you're not giving them what they want, whatever problem is going on, that's what they're going to use in the anger, the toxic anger, as a tool to try to get what they want. So you can see how these are very different: righteous anger and toxic anger. Keep in mind too, the toxic form of anger is the motivation behind the blame shifting. So you know how the toxic person will always shift the blame to you. As soon as you bring up something that they did or that they said, they immediately turn it around on you. And the narcissistic injury, this is where it's coming from. And then what's going to happen when that person gets angry and they're spewing that toxic anger at you, they're going to try to violate your boundary either aggressively and overtly by raging, by verbal abuse, by smear campaigns, that kind of thing. Or they're going to take the covert way, the more indirect or passive-aggressive way, and they're going to try to guilt trip you into feeling bad for setting your boundary, into feeling selfish for setting a boundary or saying no or not wanting to go along with what they want you to do. They're also going to shame you for having that boundary. They're going to make fun of you, or they're going to somehow tell you that something's wrong with you, or you're just too sensitive, or you're the only one who has this boundary and this problem, that kind of thing. So expect this kind of behavior from abusers and learn to recognize the difference. Learn to validate your righteous anger. That you're angry at an abusive person who hurt you, who manipulated you, who used you, who violated you. It's not that you're angry because you didn't get what you wanted. That's a very different kind of anger. So I want you to get that perspective in your mind and remind that over and over again to yourself. If you're having difficulty acknowledging the anger, feeling the anger, or accepting the fact that you are angry about the abuse, and then go ahead and do the anger processing exercise because you really want to get that out of your body so that it doesn't eat you alive, so that it doesn't turn into depression. And if you are really depressed, chances are that means you need to get angry to get over the depression. You got to figure out what you're angry about. And again, that's not a blame. That's not a blame. That means probably something happened to you. Some kind of violation took place. You're angry about it. You couldn't deal with it or didn't know how to deal with it. So you stuffed it internally and it became depression. So this is the topic that I wanted to put out there for you guys today. I'm sending you all a big hug.